Today we are going to start with the second novel that you have in your MELS 202 paper. We have done the picture of Dorian Gray. I have completed, I've given you 3 video lectures on a picture of Dorian Gray. We are going to start with the second novel that you have. You need to do 3 novels. The second novel that you need to do, that you have in your syllabus is Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Uh, So I'll give you an introduction today to Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights. This is going to be a comparatively short video, just the introduction. We are not going into the text or anything related to the text, uh, the paradigms of the text. So first, just a few words about Emily Bronte, just because she is a very important character, not just because she's writing a novel which we are still reading after 500 years after her death. Not that, the very fact that she, being a woman, has written a novel, a full-length novel which has got published and is considered now as a canon in literary studies. The word canon, CANON, in literary studies means mainstream, something that is mainstream. Okay, so that in itself is very interesting and very surprising, considering the fact that the time when she was writing the novel, those times were not very liberated in terms of gender roles and gender identities. Society was very stringent, very misogynist, very patriarchal. Gender roles were very strict, and any unadherence to gender roles was absolutely punished from both point of views, from the male and from the female point of view. And obviously the stereotypes of male gender roles were always uh, elitist, and the stereotypes of the female gender roles were always domestic. And so for a woman to write a novel, she needs education, and not just any education, a very good pedigree of education, because it's normal education is not going to help you write a full-length novel. And this opportunity or service of getting education as a woman, or having your family allow for that education, spend money on female education or in the family, was not something that was very common in uh, in the Victorian English society, especially in the suburbs of the Victorian. Especially in the suburbs of the Victorian English society, and that is why the Brontes become very important, because the Brontes were 3 sisters, Emily, Charlotte, and Anne. They were born in not a very well-to-do family. Their father, Patrick Bronte, was an Irish clergyman, not a very well-to-do family, not absolutely impoverished, but then also not very, not a landowner, not an elitist. They had a brother, so there were 4. Patrick Bronte had 3 girls and 1 boy, the brother Branwell Bronte. If you see the image here, the image is painted by the brother Branwell Bronte, and the lady in the middle in the green dress is Emily. She's flanked by her sisters Charlotte and Anne. This is Branwell Bronte's painting of his sisters. This is so the Bronte family becomes very interesting and important in the fact that Patrick Bronte, being the patriarch of the family, the head of the family, allowed education to his not only allowed education not only to Branwell but also to Charlotte, Emily, and Anne. Obviously, they did not go to school, but they were educated at home, and you can understand that the degree of education that they received was not a very uh, primary one. It was a very complex system of education that you would expect anyone to get if they complete formal education. And also, the three sisters were, to a very certain degree, quite self-taught. They used to take books from their father's library. They were voracious readers, and they just read. And that is why Wuthering Heights becomes so important, and even more because Emily Bronte, as a figure, becomes a figure of resistance of Victorian England. Someone who is bashing the stereotypes, bringing out everything that is base in the society out in the open, voicing her concerns. And again, this is something that we will see in the novel, treatment of women. Now, the treatment of women is something that is a motif in all the three sisters' works. MOTIF. The word motif means symbols which are, or themes which are recurring, which happen again, again, and again. Those are called motifs. So Emily wrote Wuthering Heights, Charlotte wrote Jane Eyre, and Anne wrote The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. If you go through the summary of the three novels, you will see that the treatment of women in Victorian society is a very important part. Uh, it is best described by Charlotte in Jane Eyre, where she has an entire chapter where the titular character Jane Eyre speaks about female rights, and the fact that the Victorian England have no rights. But this is again a recurring motive. You find this motive more in Charlotte Bronte and a little less in Emily and Anne, but it is there nonetheless. And the three sisters were brought up in a very uh, their bringing up was not very mainstream like us. They had to move from house to house. As I told you, their financial position of their family was not as strong. The sisters were quite physically quite weak bodied. They were not very able bodied, and as a result, they were falling in and out of illnesses. So their childhood, their adolescence, even their adulthood was not something uh, very easy. They had struggled with life, and you can find the currents of those struggles in the novels that they have written. Uh, she published the book under her pseudonym, that is Alice Bell. All the three sisters had pseudonyms. Uh, Emily called herself Alice Bell. Uh, I guess Charlotte called herself Currer Bell. I don't quite remember, and I don't remember what Anne called herself. So these are the names under which their books were published. Because again, try to understand the nature of Victorian society. For a woman to write a book in Victorian society is a taboo, because women are not associated with intelligence; they are just associated with, well, domesticity, as I was telling you. And that is why the elitist, quote unquote, moralist Victorian society would often look down upon and satirize the family from which these women were coming. And this made it absolutely essential that they use pseudonyms and not their actual names. As for Emily, if my recollection of all information is correct, then Wuthering Heights was published while she was alive. She died at a very tender age, probably from tuberculosis. And after her death, Charlotte Bronte edited another version of Wuthering Heights. She had the manuscript and she edited the manuscript, and an edited version was posthumously published after Emily's death. Now we come to the novel, a few details about the novel. It was published in 1847 under the pseudonym Alice Bell. It challenged strict Victorian ideals regarding religious hypocrisy, morality, social classes, and gender inequality. Whatever you read in the novel is the novelist's realization of the society that she lived in. And as I was telling you, Victorian society was moralist, but that was had morals, but that was again a very showing of religious moral dictated by the Church of England, morals that were not actually liberating morals, but just morals for the sake of morals. So for example, if I give you an example, if I am to speak of morals or etiquettes, the fact that the woman has to be the angel of the house, uh, something again, the angel of the house motive is a very important motive in Charlotte Bronte's uh, Jane Eyre, absolutely, with the character of Bertha Mason. If you have read the novel, you don't have the novel in your syllabus, but if you want to read it up or read the summary, you can. So the women are not supposed to be gregarious. The women are not supposed to be larger than life. The women are not supposed to be loud. The women are not supposed to have any agency. Now, this agency word, agency is a technical term. The word agency means anyone who has an individuality and can do what he or she wants to do. So that is why she's speaking about. So this is what morality is. I was speaking of morality, and so if you have a woman who protests against something, Victorian society was will consider it to be very unmoralist, because their morals were they associated morals with a set of societal rules which were historically created, passed on from generation to generation, and since they were passed on from generation to generation, they were to be accepted, no questions asked. It is these morals, it is these hypocrisies that you get the boy of the family educated, but you don't get the woman or the girl of the family educated. Again, this is a recurring theme in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, where Jane was denied education and she was self-taught to a certain degree, and when she became adamant that she wanted education, she was shipped off to a very third degree religious school which gave no proper education. So these are the hypocrisies. So again, social classes. So this was we speaking about gender inequality and morality. Social classes again form another very important structure, especially in this novel, Wuthering Heights. Even in the London society was a very feudal society. Feudal society, I mean, there's a king or the queen, uh, then there are landlords, and then there are everyone who works for the landlords. End of story, full stop. The king has the highest power, the queen has the highest power, then comes the dukes, the lords, the earls, the sirs, and then come the common people like you and me. It was only with the Industrial Revolution and the coming of the middle class that this feudal class structure got absolutely destroyed. And suddenly, common men like you and me started to get money, started to have money in their hands, something which was not possible in that feudal structure. So, this novel speaks of this feudal structure and the ills of this structure very much. The protagonist, one of the protagonists in the novel, Heathcliff. So Heathcliff is an orphan. He is brought to Wuthering Heights by the then patriarch of Wuthering Heights. And Heathcliff, since he's an orphan, uh, he does not come from a good family. He's negated to servantship. He's not given education. He's not considered to be given education. Not even the question arises. And so it is a critique of classes, and how uh, Heathcliff falls in love with Catherine Earnshaw, and Catherine Earnshaw being the daughter of the patriarch of the person to whom Wuthering Heights belonged to. Heathcliff could never marry Catherine Earnshaw, and Catherine Earnshaw also, bound in the stringent hypocritical Victorian societal norms, decided not to marry Heathcliff, because a gentle woman never married a common man. And this caused Heathcliff to leave Wuthering Heights, go to London, spend a considerable amount of time in London, where as a result of industrial revolution, he becomes a businessman, an industrialist, and returns back to Wuthering Heights with a quite a good fortune with which he buys Wuthering Heights at a later point of the novel. So critique of social classes and class structures is again a very important motive, is a very important theme in Wuthering Heights. The destruction of the feudal order, the creation of the middle class, a middle class that has now money in their hand and can challenge the landlords, challenge the lords. The novel also explores effects of envy, nostalgia, pessimism, and resentment. Again, so Wuthering Heights is the main theme of Wuthering Heights is romance. It is a love story. It is Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff's love story, but it is not a straightforward, direct love story. It is a very twisted love story, and most of the love in this love story gets shrouded out by resentment, pessimism, and hatred that Heathcliff harbors towards Catherine Earnshaw and her family and Edgar Linton, the man that Earnshaw chose over Heathcliff to marry, and how he goes about to destroy their lives because because of what he feels as a betrayal from Catherine. Now when we do the novel, we'll come to see that Catherine honestly and truly loved Heathcliff, and she only loved Heathcliff throughout her life. It was because of the societal pressures that she had to marry Edgar Linton. Heathcliff never tries to see this point of view. So again, the woman is given no voice. Whatever Heathcliff does, it is the man who judges everything that the woman does. Never for one he once Heathcliff tries to understand Catherine's situation or lets Catherine explain the situation. It is the man's assessment of the woman which results in Heathcliff indulge in a plethora of hatredful acts, buying Wuthering Heights, uh, in enslaving the then family because they were not as financially strong as Heathcliff had become while he was away in London. So when I say it explores the effects of envy, nostalgia, pessimism, and resentment, I mean how these qualities affect people and characters and psychologies and the reality of their emotions. So, how Heathcliff and Catherine's love story, the love that they harbor within themselves, between themselves, is almost kind of destroyed because of Heathcliff's uh, hatred. Uh, and it results in Heathcliff going mad at the end of the story after Catherine's death because Heathcliff, having loved Catherine to the extent that he did, was unable to bear a life without Catherine. Now, even after Catherine's dead, after Catherine is dead, he's even more unable to look into the eye of a world where and live in the world where he can't find his Catherine. So he almost turns insane and he dies. And it is in death that the two lovers are uh, united together as Heathcliff desires to be buried in a grave just beside Catherine's. When it was published, it was controversial because of its unusually stark depiction of mental and physical cruelty. This mental and physical cruelty leads the mental and physical cruelty that Heathcliff goes through, that Catherine goes through, that Heathcliff projects after his becoming onto the families after he's becoming a rich man, how manipulation is done and how this results in destruction of families, destruction of bonds. And even more, it was a greater controversy because it was a woman writing a novel and it was a woman writing about the interiors of human psychology, which she should not do because the woman was had the, the woman has nothing has no intelligence to understand anything that has to do with the mind or the psychology. things which are considered to be abstract and more complex. This is a quote from Wuthering Heights. This is Heathcliff's quote where he addresses Catherine's ghost and after Catherine's death. And this is, I think, one of the most haunting lines in English literature. A line which represents love, which represents regret, repentance, madness, insecurity. Haunting lines. Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. God, it's unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. Yeah, as this is one of the most brilliant and haunting lines that I personally have ever encountered in English literature. And I don't think any study of Wuthering Heights is complete without this quote or a study of this quote. Now, we are not going to study the quote right now. We are going to do it later as we progress. Now, the genre is Gothic novel. It is a Gothic novel. It is designed to both horrify and fascinate readers. There is passion, there is cruelty, there is a very supernatural element. The setting is very dark, eerie, foreboding. You have the Yorkshire moors where end on end there is nothing but grasslands, and then there's the moon and just a tree once in a while, a very supernatural atmosphere, a very romantic atmosphere again, but a very chillingly romantic atmosphere where it is almost as if uh, the eerie atmosphere, the supernatural, you're afraid of the supernatural, but the supernatural still calls to you. Just like there's Catherine's ghost, there's Heathcliff running mad. Uh, Wuthering Heights, by the end of the novel, is an absolutely unkempt mansion. Uh, so you would look at it and you would feel as if it's an abandoned mansion. So the genre is Gothic. Now, there are some related information which I think you should know to understand the story better. The narrator of the story is a person called Lockwood, a person of Lockwood, or called Lockwood, who's come to the Yorkshire moors because he's sick. He's from London. He comes to the Yorkshire moors to live there and recuperate. And he lives in he rents Wuthering Heights from Heathcliff, and he lives in Heathcliff. The story is told by Lockwood from his point. Story is told by Lockwood as he takes entries into his own diary, into his own diary. So the story that you read is actually Lockwood writing down in his own diary. And the story is told to Lockwood by a servant called Nellie Dean. So the point of view from which the story is told is Nellie's point of view. How she perceives whatever has happened in Wuthering Heights, how she perceives the characters, what she thinks has happened in Wuthering Heights. So all the description of Heathcliff, Edgar Linton, of Thrushcross Grange, Wuthering Heights itself, uh, Catherine Earnshaw, and everyone that you find in the story is being told from Nellie Dean's perspective. The setting that is the Yorkshire moors. Nellie Dean starts telling her story from 1770. So when Nellie is narrating her story to Lockwood, the story originates in 1770, and Lockwood finally leaves Yorkshire in 1802, the Yorkshire moors in 1802, because he, and I quote, gets tired of the moors. And the place is Wuthering Heights. It takes place in or around two neighboring houses on the Yorkshire moors, uh, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Now, what does the word moor means? Moor is means wet grasslands. Now, if you go to England, you will see that the northern part of England, in the states of Yorkshire, especially in the states of Yorkshire and Lancashire, if you go to a bit to the interior towards Scotland, you will see that there are vast expanses of grasslands, not dry, arable grasslands, but wet grasslands. And it's almost like a never ending stretch of land. with a few trees here and there. The soil is very wet. It's not a very stiff soil. It's a very sticky, wet soil. Uh, so this is the moor, the Yorkshire moors. It is almost very near to the sea. So this is the setting of the story. I will stop here today, and we shall start with the story proper, the novel proper, and the characters in the next lecture. If you have any problems, feel free to contact me.